Good morning.
All right. All right. Guys are getting going here. All right, man. Well, today I figured first of all, I'm on my way to Boston here. So going to shop in Ocean's office to do a quick training for some people. But I wanted to still hop on and do a huddle about money today because money is something that I had a poor relationship with in the past. And maybe you're there today. Maybe you've got a great relationship with money. Maybe you look at money as a tool. You see it as your friend. You see it as something that you command and control. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you were like me, and I'll tell you a little bit of my story today. Maybe you were, controlled by money a little bit. Maybe you didn't have a good relationship with it. And maybe you always thought to yourself, oh, there's never enough. There's never enough. If you ever looked at your bank account and thought to yourself, where does all the money go? This huddle is for you. And the reason is because we spend most of our days actually working for this thing that we most of the time don't have a great relationship with. We really don't. We look at money most often as hopefully for the good that it can do you and maybe good that it can do for the world. That's great. I've heard that phrase before. But oftentimes there's just never enough. And so we think to ourselves, how do we get more of this? Real quick before I go on, how many of you had parents that prepared you for money? Your relationship with money? Put that in the
That's a
chat
joke.
real quick. Put that in the chat, 0 to 10. 10 being like, you know what, they sat you down, they showed you how money worked, they showed you how to balance a checkbook, they taught you about taxes, they gave you all the indications about investing. If they did all that, put a 10. If you're like my parents and they kind of at one point helped you open a bank account and that was about it, maybe put a 2 or 3 there in the chat. I would just love to see, how did your parents set you up for success with money? There we go. Let's check. We're getting negatives. Whoa, Nick DiMartino with an 11. Good for you, man. That's amazing. Veronica, negative 10. Absolutely not. 3s. All right, cool. So we got some people who probably grew up a little bit similar to me. Hey, the other thing I want to say, too, is that money is one of those hard things that, like, some people feel like they can't teach about something if they haven't done it well. Let me say that again. Some people feel like they cannot teach something if they haven't done it well. Many of you will say, a new coaching client came to me yesterday, and he said, David, I know everything that I need to do. I know all of it. I just don't do it. And that's true with money as well. We know what we need to do. We just don't do it. So I kind of want to share with you a little bit of my story and what I did and what my experiences were. So I grew up in a really, probably, I don't want to call it strict, but pretty conservative Christian household where, I was taught, money is the root of all evil or the root of all kinds of evil. Spiritual things and, emotional things were put far in advance. My parents prepared me really well in some ways in those regards. But when it came to money, they didn't really do that. My dad grew up as an immigrant from England. His parents moved here when he was 7, and he had a decent idea about like how to grow wealth. And my mom's family are immigrants from Italy, and they knew a little bit about how to deal with money. But my parents themselves really didn't. They were part of a generation that had that immigrant work ethic, which was great, but they just didn't manage money well. And I remember when I was a young kid, we didn't have a whole lot. And then all of a sudden my dad started making a bunch of money. He got into real estate as an appraiser. And we started to have a lot more in our lives. And it was great. We'd go out to eat all the time. And, whatever we wanted, we had. My dad drove a BMW. My mom drove an Audi. It was really nice. But then they got divorced and life turned totally sideways. My mom was making 14. She had no education and became a paraprofessional in the school systems, and she was making around $15,000 a year. She was making 15 grand a year, and she was raising my sister and I. And you can probably imagine, if you do the math, divide 15,000 by 12, and she wasn't making a whole lot. And we all of a sudden had this really, really hard relationship with money. My dad basically got super depressed. His business collapsed, and my dad was living in a one-bedroom in East Hartford. He and my sister and I shared a bedroom together, and then we'd trade off sleeping on the couch. This is not a pity party. This is just telling you that this was the contrast of my relationship with money. And some of you have grown up in very similar aspects where your relationship with money was great and then it was bad, or it was bad and then it was great, or whatever it was. And when I started to believe in my mind, and what started to write over in my brain, almost like a tape recorder would play over in my mind, is we never have enough. We never have enough. My mom would go grocery shopping, and she would say this common phrase all the time. She would write it on the refrigerator. She would say, when it's gone, it's gone. When it's gone, it's gone. I was 13 years old, 14 years old. I was, playing sports, and I'd want to eat all the food in the whole world, right? And I'd eat through. She would buy me turkey and roast beef for sandwiches. I'd eat it all in like 2 days. And then I'd be like, hey, Mom, what do we got for this? She's like, when it's gone, it's gone. You can eat peanut butter and jelly now. Now, again, no pity parties. It was just a relationship with money. And I guarantee you I'm not the only one here on the huddle this morning talking about a relationship with money that wasn't stellar. And it was really weird, because you wanted to go out and you wanted to earn this money, but then when you would go to church, it was like, well, money's not really that good. And I would kind of sit there in a pew and I'd be like, bullshit, dude, bullshit. I don't mind having a little extra cash here, because that actually helped me and my family right now. And I don't know what you're talking about roots of all kinds of evil. The roots of all kind of evil is like, I only get a minute and a half in the shower before my mom's banging on the door because she's so worried about the electric bill, right? And the heat bill and everything else. And if you've been in a situation like that, then you've probably thought to yourself, man, there's never enough. Money, I don't know how to command it. In those days, we didn't really have a way to command money. We didn't understand it. It was years later that I ended up getting into construction, and I was waiting tables, and I started making good money for myself. I ended up getting into a relationship where, money also wasn't really managed super well. And, as much as I had a little bit of an uptick, during the next few years after high school and into college, by the time I was married, I ended up having a really poor relationship with money again. And this time, it was the evidence not of what was going on in my family's life and the decisions of my parents, but what was going on in the decisions of my heart. And, I've always heard this from, very, very wealthy people, is that money is the great amplifier. It is also the great magnifier. I'll say that again. Money is the great amplifier, and it is the great magnifier. Money amplifies what's going on inside of you. If you are, feeling like you would want to take over the world, like, you'll spend money in such a way. If you need to prove yourself to others, you will spend money in such a way. It magnifies what's going on inside of you. I've often, heard this phrase, your calendar and your wallet are the best examples to tell what a person's into. What is going on in their life? The verse that says, where your treasure is, your heart will be also, is so applicable here. Because what we love and what we focus on, that's where we spend our time, and that's where we spend our money. And so I wanted to take a minute to talk about what eventually happened. In 2015, I ended up getting into probably one of the worst financial positions of my life. It was horrible. I ended up spending way more than I was making. I didn't even think I was. In fact, it was so bad that I wouldn't even look at my bank accounts, because there was a visceral reaction that would end up happening to me when I looked at my bank accounts. There was never enough. In fact, they say most divorces happen over finances, most splits in relationships. And the reason is because we're constantly looking at ourselves and justifying it by our intentions, and we're justifying everyone else by their actions. We're looking at our intentions of how we wanted to spend our money, but we're looking at others as how they do spend our money. And it was the worst it could be. Eventually, I got into a really bad position where I was $88,000 in back taxes, $30,000 in credit card debt, and a state levy was getting put against my house. I was at my wit's end. I had no other choice but to figure it out. I had to stare it in the face. And so what ended up happening was I ended up hiring an accountant, and my cousin Ben Rocky, who is, manages finances here on the team still to this day, he eventually got with me and said, hey man, we've got to figure your life out. We have to figure out what's going on. And we got super strict and we got super accountable, and we literally got into a position to save my financial future. Now, what that looks like for myself and what that might look like for you, that's going to be different for everybody. But you might be in a position today, my friends, I don't know where you're at, where you actually need to get super serious about your relationship with money. I learned a few lessons in those times, is that money is it's like a dog, right? Like, I just started really becoming a dog person over the last few years with being married to Molly. But dogs apparently get anxious if they don't have a task to do. And money does too. Money gets anxious when it doesn't have a task to do. And the issue that I was running into in 2015 and before was that I had no task for the money except for the simple fact of my own desires. Because money would give me what I wanted, and there was no end to what I wanted. You might be there too. We have a desire, we know what we want in life, and we see our money as the pathway to get what we want. The hardest part about that, as much as that can be true, is that there's no end to what we want. There will be no end. There's always something more. Something else will show up. And as long as we have that mindset, we'll constantly look and ask, where did all the money go? Why don't I ever seem to have enough? Why do things seem so scarce for me, but so abundant for others? Eventually, I had to turn around, and I had to really grasp what I was spending on. I realized for myself I couldn't do what I wanted all the time. In fact, I had to take a position of leadership and command. I had to become the next version of myself, the better version of myself, that would allow me to be able to command money and to be able to give it a task every day rather than just let it do what it wanted. I realized this about money, is that money will never pay a bill on its own. It will also never buy that steak that you want on its own. It will never invest on its own. It always must be given a task. Money is something that works for those who give it a job. Money will always work for those who give it a job. But if you don't give something if kids are not, your kids are teenagers, do they want to go and work? Some might immediately want to, but we've all heard stories of people who just don't have to work. They don't have to. It'll just sit around, right? And we waste it. And that's what we do with money. Money eventually just gets wasted. Now, you might be in a position that's more or less like where I was when I was younger, and I was like, dude, I needed every penny and dollar. Well, here's the other lesson that I learned, is that money from others, this is a wild thought, I need you to listen to this. The money from others is always being given a task as well. Other people have money, and they're sending out that task as well. What I had to learn was, what does everyone want to send their money out to do? And how could I be in between them and that money? I started to look at money a little bit differently, rather than just my own efforts, because I could always work. I could work harder and harder and hustle and grind. I could get all the motivation stuff in the world that I wanted, or I could become smart. And I could start to ask myself, what do people actually want to do with their money? And how could I get in between? Well, what I realized was, people they actually want to buy houses and they want to spend money, and they'll gladly do that. But they want to do it in such a way that X, Y, Z. And then I filled in the blanks and built the team around that X, Y, Z. The biggest one on that was demand excellence. Understanding that people actually wanted to buy houses, and they would give you lots of money to buy houses if you could do it for them in a certain way. And that's what I've committed my entire professional career to doing, is demand excellence and showing people how to do it. And I've never had an issue ever since with the amount of people who will buy houses. They will always call because of demand excellence. So I want to ask you a question today. Where are you with money? Now, I don't mean how much is in your bank account. What's your relationship with it? I know I bet I could ask every one of you privately, Pick the number, close your eyes, and pick the number in your head. What's sitting in your bank account right now? Most of you know it's sitting in your bank account, your checking account, your investment accounts, anything else. And where is it? What's it doing? What's the task for it today? You might say, well, I've assigned all the tasks, man, and I don't have enough. Great. Let's move on to the next stage then. The next stage is what is other people are doing? Where are they setting their money tasks? And how can you get in between it? What do they really want? Hopefully you guys can hear me. Sorry, guys, it looks like it cut out for a second. How can you get in between other people and where they are with their money? Now, there's a negative side to this, right? The negative side is some people know that other people will not send their money out with tasks, and they will easily take it. That's where the roots of all evil come from. Okay, I'm just going to sell you things that you don't need. But that's not what we're doing here. We're providing a way that we can say, well, if someone's going to send their money out for a task to get something done because they absolutely need housing, what's the way in which they would give us so much of it? The way through that is demand excellence by doing it a certain path. I'm very excited. I'm going to be signing a 20-unit subdivision, and I got the message this morning. I was able to provide the 14 steps to this builder the other day, and he replied back, I'm blown away. I'm blown away. And I realized for myself at this point, I don't get super, I'm not like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great monetarily. I just know that, you know what, there's someone out there who's sending out their money to do a task every day. And who I am and what I'm offering is going to meet that task with excellence. And they're going to be delighted to give it to me over and over and over again. Guys, I'm so pumped to be a part of your lives. I'm so pumped that, we might share experiences about, not having great examples with money or relationships with money. But what I am confident of is it doesn't have to keep going, and it can start and change today. There's always one person. I remember reading this. I'll kind of wrap up with this. I remember, some of you know I was previously married. And I remember when I was 21, I was in a room, and I had just picked up Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I had read a page in there that said, would you give up 5 years of doing whatever you want so that you could change the trajectory of your family tree? Would you give up 5 years of doing what you want so that you could change the trajectory of your family's financial tree? And I thought to myself at that point, David, you're going to do that. You're going to be the one. You're going to be the person who changes the Brook financial tree. You're going to be the one who says, no, it would have just money gets me what I want. Yes, it does. I know that it can, but that's not going to be my view on it. I'm going to view money as going out every day like a little worker. I think of my bank account, and I think of the number that is. That's how many workers I have. And I'm going to send them out to do a task every single day. I'm going to command them. You're not going to move until I tell you. And every task and choice that I make is because of my command. I will own and take ownership of my choices of where that money goes. I'm not going to let it be anxious and just go away. I'm going to choose. And I'm going to be the one to change my family tree. I hope that's you today, guys. I hope that's you, and you change the direction of your financial family tree. Will you do that? Will you make that choice today? Will you do it like I did in 2015? You don't have to be destitute like I was. You don't have to be losing your house. You don't have to be so far back in credit card debt that you can't even make your minimums. You don't have to be there like me. And I'm encouraging you. I'm not shouting right now, but I am inside. Don't do it. Don't wait to get there. Start now and today. Look at your bank account. Look at what it is and see it as tasks that can go out. And then look around and know that there are so many people in this world, in Connecticut, in Massachusetts, in Rhode Island, in Florida, that all want to deploy their money, and they want to deploy it to buy houses. There's thousands and thousands of houses being sold every year, no matter if the market's good or bad. No matter if it's good or bad, they're being sold. And the only thing that they need to see is your demand excellence. That's what they need to see, demand excellence. And that is the product, my friends, that they will buy every day, hands down, no questions asked. Demand excellence. Thank you guys for joining me this morning. It's a pleasure being a part of your lives. And I wish you the best today. Make it a great day, guys. Make it a great weekend. Keep up the great work. And then next week, I'm really excited for this fellow 30 days, 30 listings challenge. Join me in that. I'm already ready and I'm fired up. I'm in the trenches with you. Let's make it happen. Have a good day.